Jazz became the soundtrack of the 1920s. It originated in New Orleans within the African American community. As Prohibition in the United States began, jazz became popular in speakeasies, naming it as immoral. Similar to jazz emerged blues music. Through economic crisis, blues music often focused on the hard times. Many early blues recordings came from black female singers, and this was one of the ways that women could have a voice and be influential with their music. At this point in history, women had very little rights. This was around the time that they first gained the right to vote, and they were finally gaining a voice. Blues music only helped fuel this era. In the 1930s, radio became popular during the Great Depression. People could not afford phonograph records and turned to the radio for a free escape. 1930s jazz matured with Billie Holiday, who used her powerful voice to speak to people in these times. The upbeat tempo and uplifting sounds were the dance beats that allowed people to have fun while listening to. Alongside jazz, there was the hillbilly folk music of Jimmie Rodgers and other similar artists. The barn dance shows that featured this kind of music became very popular in the South. Western music became popular during the trends of cowboys in Hollywood. The themes of love, loss, and hope and heartbreak spoke to the basic human emotions. Alongside the radio, jukeboxes became a good replacement for live bands. Many nightclubs could not afford live bands during the Great Depression, but there were more control over what listeners listened to than over the radio. The 1940s brought the use of the long-playing record. They could hold about 20 minutes of music per side. The first release of the catalog number that was a reissue of the Frank Sinatra album set, The Voice of Frank Sinatra, had great appeal to teenage girls, who opened up a whole new audience for pop music, which had previously appealed to mostly adults. He was among the crooners singing smoothly into an amplified microphone. Photographed as a sex image of Hollywood and the music industry, Sinatra was always surrounded by beautiful women. During the World War II, with many men off at war, Sinatra was a heartthrob to focus on. The birth of rock and roll in the 1950s brought a whole new sound. It combined elements of pop, blues, and hillbilly music. At the time, America was very segregated between blacks and whites. Rock and roll was integrated. Blacks and whites could play together. Disc jockeys on the radio helped introduce this kind of music. It was finally a link between the programming and the audience. Rock and roll began to be introduced to a broader audience with the singer Elvis. The American teen craziness, first introduced with Frank Sinatra, furthered. Elvis was seen as a controversial thing with his loud music and hip-thrusting dance moves. As the Cold War approached, parents were paranoid that Elvis was a communist plot to reach their children. They were also apprehensive that he was a white singer that sounded black. Before, there had been a separate type of music for blacks and whites, but after World War II, there was no racial barrier. After the birth of rock and roll, the approach of the 1960s allowed it to grow even further. Along with that, there was the rebirth to folk music. Bob Dylan had acoustic music with contemporary themes and issues. The civil rights movement, along with the protests of the Vietnam War, helped him gain a huge audience. On the other hand, there was the British invasion led by the Beatles. They first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show to a wide audience. They had a core audience of teeny boppers, but this audience was easily influenced to their fashion and cultural trends. They were a different kind of artist because they actually wrote their own music. They created the first concept album with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Their influence lasted way beyond their 7 years of recording and touring. In 1965, 8-track tapes became available. People were no longer limited to the random choice of the radio. They could even carry tapes of their favorite recording artists in their car and listen to them, as Chrysler and GM were offering them. In the 1970s, punk rock developed in the United States. It was a cultural phenomenon of the youthful rebellion. Characterized by distinctive styles of clothing and anti-authoritarian ideologies, bands like the Ramones fueled this era. The band made little commercial success, but that was the point. The point of punk was to get away from the mainstream likes of the acts like the Beatles. The nasally vocals and lyrics that are almost shouted instead of sung made them seem dangerous. Very oppositely, the dance movement of the disco overtook the nation. Many clubs had intense lighting systems that throbbed to the beat of the music. Bands such as Donna Summer and the Bee Gees had some musical success within this era. In technology, Sony came up with the Walkman, and it became the first portable music device. In the 1980s, Michael Jackson became a child star turned phenomenon. He transformed his music from the preteen image into a whole new view on pop music. His music video for Thriller is known as one of the most famous music videos of all time. Its 13 minutes involves a plot, dance moves, and effects. Michael made it so a music video was required to have a hit single. MTV, or music television, emerged in 1983 and became a quick trend. They helped Jackson with this idea that for an artist to be popular, they had to have video potential as well. Along with Jackson, Madonna became the idol for teen girls. She was very comfortable with her sex symbol status. She had a strong message of gender equality. As one of the first majorly popular female artists, she was a symbol of female empowerment. At this point in the time of women were finally starting to earn respect in the workplace and have completely equal rights. Madonna was used as a figure for young girls that they could be confident and sexually powerful too. Rap music started to emerge in the mainstream music industry with groups like Run DMC. While their music was appropriate enough to be played on the radio, they broke genre barriers with their mashup with the group Aerosmith in the song Walk This Way. They began the era of hip-hop's golden age. In technology, the compact disc emerged. This was a significant change in the music history as everyone had a device that had higher capacity and protected musical purity. Music could now be taken anywhere. In the 1990s, two types of drastically different music emerged. The first of the two was rap music. Heavily controversial, a new type of rap became popular called gangsta rap. With lyrics speaking on conditions in heavily African American communities, the topics were mainly drugs, violence, and gangs. Tupac Shakur was the epitome of this style of rap. Rap consisted of mostly black rappers, but these racial boundaries were broken with the popularity of Eminem in the late 90s. Teens looked towards music like this for either a relatability factor or a form of rebellion. In a completely opposite genre, mainstream pop controlled the charts for most of the 90s. Bubblegum pop consisted of young girls and boy bands focused around their image. Britney Spears had a hit album with Hit Me Baby One More Time. As a teen idol, she was perceived as a good Christian girl whose sex appeal was overplayed. Much like Madonna, Spears created fashion trends and was viewed as a role model for young girls. Boy bands such as NSYNC were the new heartthrobs, singing love songs and performing upbeat dance moves. They were non-threatening and never perceived as dangerous, and a good escape from the hardcore stuff in music.